On this episode of The Digital Keep, cybersecurity wasn't even a degree. It wasn't a job title. It wasn't even a word most people had ever heard. In fact, the first text we see of this term comes from a science fiction book, Kaduna Memories by Jack McKinney in 1990. How is it that it became one of the most sought-after skill sets in the world? Does cybersecurity have or even deserve a seat at the big table in the C-suite? That's what we will explore. This is The Digital Keep. Welcome to The Digital Keep. I'm Guy. This is a show about people, technology, cybersecurity, and networks. It's a show for people trying to build legacy. Welcome, Keepers, and thank you for checking in again. Before we continue, smash that like button and subscribe so you won't miss any episodes or shorts. If you like what we are doing and the community we can build, share it with a friend or coworker. I really appreciate it. Now, let's dive in. When we're talking about cybersecurity, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. If you joined the workforce before the 1990s, it may be a little scary and mystical, unless you're one of those few who were part of the origin story. For those of us who joined the workforce in the 1990s, it may be a little confusing if you aren't in tech, and it's probably annoying even if you are in tech. But we grew up in our professional lives with it from around the late 1990s onward. If you joined the workforce after 2005, then you got introduced to it in some manner well before graduating high school. And it's just a part of how things are and have always been, at least from your perspective. Cybersecurity hasn't always been, just like IT hasn't always been, and flying 1,000 miles in a few hours hasn't always been. I don't have your personal experience, so I'll share mine, and hopefully it will resonate as we walk from the late 1900s, 1993 to be exact, through today about what I've seen and what I think is coming next. When I graduated high school in the early 1990s, there was no degree path for information technology. Not at the schools I was looking at anyway. Not in any catalog I ever picked up. And cybersecurity? That word didn't exist yet, not in any form that would have appeared in a course description or a job posting. It was science fiction. Something for intelligence agencies most people never thought about, or academics writing papers nobody outside a lab would ever read. I did what a lot of people my age did when they were tired of classrooms, wanted independence, and also wanted to work with technology, but had no roadmap. I found another door. I enlisted in the United States Navy, which ironically led to classrooms and a lot of structure and rules on top of regulations. I had no idea at the time that I was stepping into the first chapter of a career that would eventually lead me to building and leading an industrial controls cybersecurity team for the first new nuclear fuel production facility the United States has licensed in 50 years. A technology that is shaping what comes next in energy, a role that didn't exist when I was 18, and a field that barely had a name. That gap between the career I couldn't see and the one I ended up building is what this episode is really about. Because I didn't get here alone. I am the legacy of many and got here because along the way, they invested in me. Mentors, the OG keepers, pointed out the potholes before I hit them. And because I stayed curious enough to keep learning, even when there was no curriculum to follow, now I have a responsibility to all of them to live up to what they saw in me and to build the next generation of keepers. Today, I want to talk about what real mentorship looks like, what both sides of it owe each other, and why the arc of this industry, from IT directors to CIOs to CISOs, tells us exactly where things are headed next, and why understanding that arc itself is a form of mentorship. Now, I will be very direct here because it's something I feel very strongly about. If you have been in technology, in operations, in security, in any corner of this industry for more than 15 years, you have accumulated something that cannot be Googled, cannot be prompted out of an AI, and cannot be absorbed from a certificate exam. You have pattern recognition earned through failure, through late nights, through being wrong in front of people who trusted you, and then having to fix it anyway. This is a debt you carry, and the way you repay it is by mentoring those to whom you will pass the torch. To be clear, what I mean is this: mentoring is not lecturing. It's not sitting across from a junior engineer and listing everything you've seen go wrong. It's not using your experience as a wall to slow someone down. Mentoring is deliberate knowledge transfer. It's pulling someone into a problem and asking, "Tell me how you'd approach this." It's knowing which hard lessons are still relevant and which ones are just history. Not that history isn't interesting. It can be, and those stories are fun. My first real classroom for this was the U.S. Navy. I came in as a kid who knew technology instinctively, but had never had it formalized. What the Navy gave me was structure. Electronic warfare, cryptology, SATCOM, all kinds of fun things. Supporting boats, pulling lines. Those things are really great structure. But more than the technical content, it gave me an understanding of why knowledge transfer isn't optional. When you're leading a crew through a real scenario, not a drill, the actual thing, you cannot afford to keep what you know locked up. The person next to you needs to understand not just what to do, but why. Because the day will come when you're not there, and the situation will be slightly different, and they'll have to figure it out themselves. That principle never left me. It transferred directly into the work at Disney. I had interns cycle through our OT security team, people protecting 40-plus attractions, including systems on some of the most complex ride technology ever built. These were sharp, energetic folks, and some of them were convinced they already knew the answers. More than a few ended up with full-time offers. Not because I handed them anything, but because I gave them real problems, let them run at them, and was honest when their approach had a flaw, without making it personal. Several of those people are doing meaningful work in this industry right now. That matters to me more than most things on my resume. Now I'm at X Energy, and the dynamic is different again. When you're the senior security voice at a facility that has never existed before and is still in construction, honestly, in this country, there's no predecessor to call. No one who did exactly the job at exactly this type of plant. The obligation isn't just to mentor the people around me. It's to help build the foundation of the next generation of operational technology security professionals at nuclear facilities. The potholes I'm driving through right now are the ones I'll be able to describe to someone in 10 years. That's the obligation. But this only works if the other side of the relationship shows up too. I will be equally deliberate. If you're early in your career in technology or security, I want to talk to you for a minute. You are building on a foundation that took 30 years and a lot of expensive mistakes to construct. The architectures you're working inside, the frameworks you're learning, the very structure of how organizations think about technology risk, none of that appeared out of nowhere. Someone fought for it. Someone failed at a version of it first. I know this because I was on your side of the table once. I came into the Navy not knowing what I didn't know. And the veterans around me, the chiefs, the senior technicians, they had a choice. They could have treated me as someone to be managed, but instead, the good ones treated me as someone to be developed. They answered my questions. They let me ask why. They didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing things that took them a decade to learn. What I gave back, at least what I tried to give back, once my ego and cynicism was set aside, and what I'm asking you for is genuine curiosity and respect for the experience in the room, not blind deference. I pushed back. You should push back when you think something doesn't make sense. But I pushed back with questions, not dismissals. I assumed the veteran had information I didn't have until proven otherwise. That's the posture I'm asking for. Be genuinely curious. Challenge things. Please, please challenge things. Some of those old constraints no longer apply. Some of those potholes have been filled in, and I need you to tell me when they have. You earn the right to change something by first understanding why it exists. There's a difference between challenging something with curiosity and dismissing it with impatience. Start from respect for what was built. That's the deal. Now, let me show you why all of this matters by walking you through one of the most instructive evolution stories in our entire industry. I want to walk you through a pattern, and I want you to understand that I'm not describing this from the outside. I watched most of this arc happen in real time from inside it. In the early days of enterprise computing, 1970s, 80s, and into the 90s, technology was just infrastructure, wiring in the walls. The people who managed it reported up through finance or facilities or whatever department happened to own the budget that year. The director of IT, information technology, when that title even existed, was a technical manager. Important, but not strategic. Not a voice at the table where business decisions were made. That's the world I was stepping into when I joined the Navy. A world where technology professionals were still fighting to be taken seriously at the organizational level. By 2008, when I was medically separated from the Navy, things had begun to change. Networks stopped being overhead and started being competitive advantage. The web happened. E-commerce happened. Organizations woke up to the fact that technology wasn't just supporting the business, it was becoming the business. The response was institutional. The Director of Information Technology became the Chief Information Officer. Every Fortune 500 company has one today. Almost every small business even has one today, unless they're really small. A seat at the table, a 3-letter title, a C-suite peer to the CFO and the COO. Not because someone decided to do IT a favor, but because the stakes demanded executive level accountability. Now watch what happened next, and this is where my own career starts to mirror the pattern directly. From the late 1990s into the 2010s, information security was a function buried inside IT. The Director of Information Security reported to the CIO, who, remember, had just finished their own fight for legitimacy. Security was a cost center, a compliance checkbox. The person running it was technically competent and largely invisible to the board. I was working through exactly this period, building skills in environments where nobody had a title with CISO in it yet. The concept of operational technology security barely registered outside of defense and energy sectors. Cybersecurity, as a named discipline, was just starting to take shape. I was one of the people learning it as it was being invented. Then the breaches started. Target, Equifax, Office of Personnel Management, that's the government side, Colonial Pipeline, other organizations. But the boards and regulators and shareholders started asking a question they had never seriously asked before. Who's accountable for this? The answer was the CIO, who was incentivized first by availability of the network, with cybersecurity delegated to the director level. So, the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, was born. Same trajectory as the CIO, roughly 20 years later. A function that was once buried in the org chart, elevated by the sheer weight of what was at stake. But here's where we are right now. And this is the part I want to argue directly. The CISO today is still, in many organizations, fighting for full legitimacy. Oftentimes still referred to as the Director of Information Security or the Director of Cybersecurity. Still reporting to the CIO in a lot of places. Still defending budget against business units that see security as friction. Still being invited to the table for the last 15 minutes of a conversation that should have included them from the start. This is a transitional state, not a permanent one. The future is closer than many people think. If you follow the arc, if you apply the same logic that elevated the director of IT to the CIO, then the CISO is heading somewhere beyond being invited to a seat at the table. Many organizations have a CIO and a CRO, or Chief Risk Officer, who is responsible for assessing business risks, communicating them to the C-suite, and offering solutions or working with the other Cs to mitigate those risks. I believe what's coming is a convergence, a hybrid executive role where cybersecurity, information governance, and enterprise risk management merge into a single function, where the CISO, the CIO, and the CRO are all equals, where protecting systems and protecting the organization from existential cybersecurity risks are understood to be the same level of job and the same level of importance. This is not a distant fantasy. The regulatory environment, the geopolitical threat landscape, and the increasing physical consequences of cyber events, particularly in the OT and critical infrastructure space, are already pushing organizations in that direction, whether they're ready or not. And here's where the mentorship connection comes in. This evolution is only visible if you're watching long enough to see the pattern. The people who are going to lead that convergence, the ones who will hold those roles 20 years from now, are probably early in their careers today. They need someone to hand them the long view, to say, I watched the CIO earn that seat. I watched the CISO begin the same climb. Here's what it looks like from the inside of the arc. Here's what comes next. The transfer of institutional foresight. That's the highest form of mentorship this industry has to offer. I graduated high school with no path into this field because the field didn't exist yet. Not the way it does now. What I had was curiosity, willingness to do hard things, and eventually people who took me seriously enough to invest in my development. The Navy gave me a technical foundation and my first understanding of what real knowledge transfer looks like under pressure. Disney gave me scale, the experience of protecting complex, irreplaceable systems in environments where failure is visible and immediate. Universal pushed that even further. And X Energy put me at the frontier of something genuinely new, securing the operational technology behind a nuclear fuel production process for a first of its kind power generation that is intended to truly power the future. I didn't plan that arc. I couldn't have. The path didn't exist in a form I could have mapped out when I was 18. The field grew around me, and I grew with it. And somewhere in that parallel evolution, cybersecurity went from a concept that didn't have a name to a discipline with degree programs, certifications, and regulatory apparatus that didn't exist 25 years ago. And in the near future, there will be C-suite titles. That story is going to repeat. The technologies being built right now in AI, in OT, in critical infrastructure, in advanced energy are creating roles that don't have names yet. And the people who will hold those roles are out there today, probably early in their careers or still in K through 12 and university training, trying to figure out where that path is. So here's the compact that I'm proposing. Two-sided, really non-negotiable. If you're a veteran, if you're somebody who's been in these fields for a long time, find someone actively. Don't wait for a formal mentorship program. Find someone hungry and invest in them. Pull them into real problems. Show them the potholes. Tell them why they exist. And be genuinely open when they point out that one has already been filled in. Build your legacy in them. Now, if you're in your early career, find those veterans. Not just for career advice, but for context, for the institutional knowledge and wisdom that lives nowhere in any documentation. Ask about the failures. Ask what was obvious in hindsight that nobody saw coming. Respect the foundation. Challenge the assumptions. And bring the curiosity that makes this a real exchange instead of a lecture. Begin building your legacy on their foundations. Where is the path you can't see yet? It's being built right now by the people in the industry who refuse to stop learning and who refuse to stop teaching. That's the obligation. That's what matters. That is the contract. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Digital Keep. Until next time, watch the walls, mind the gate, and build your legacy.